And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Wednesday, October 20th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by PrizePicks. They are the presenting sponsor of this show. I've been talking about PrizePicks a lot today. They're the presenting sponsor of the process show. They're the presenting sponsor of my contenders video. So it's Team PrizePicks today, that's for sure. We got a lot to talk about. I don't want to go too far into this intro because we've got 11 games. This is very different. Yesterday was the appetizer. Today is the main course. Tons to talk about. Before we do anything, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. That's what has to happen right out of the gate. We want to run those likes up as high as we possibly can. Secondly, let's start here. Adam, how are you and how did your first night of the NBA go?
I'm good. First night of NBA didn't go too well. Had a team winning until like halfway through the fourth quarter, but it was one of those where like I knew it wasn't going to win, so I was kind of just at that point rooting for it to get caught quicker so I could stop looking at $130,000 in winnings and get to my actual, like $5,000 in losses. But it was whatever. First slate is always kind of for me. It's always kind of rough because I end up having like three things that I forgot to do until, like 30 minutes before lock. But excited for tonight. Excited to get to, a real slate.
Absolutely. I know we're not going to do a Hall of Fame segment for today's show because there's 11 games and we're going to have enough trouble just getting to 10:55 and finishing this stuff off. But I know that we had someone chop on DraftKings big contest with a logo up top. Active member of our Discord. I love the Kush. Finished second on FanDuel individually, so hit for 50K. And then Mangle hit the seat for the live final for FanDuel yesterday, another Awesemo sub. So it was a pretty good day all around for our subs, but we don't have time to mess around any longer. We're diving right into this slate. The Indiana Pacers at the Charlotte Hornets. Pacers 2-point dogs, Charlotte 223 total. Karis LeVert and TJ Warren both out for Indiana. Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb are both questionable, although I expect them to be playing. Let's start on the Indiana side first, where I'm going to like Miles Turner for like the 900th straight day that he's on a slate. But what stands out most to you from the Pacers for today?
I mean, Sabonis obviously is the first guy that you're going to look at just because he's an absolute monster. Highest projected guy on the team for me by like 10 points. But, outside of that, Brogdon, Turner, I think both look fine as well. Turner, I think, is one of the better values on Indiana. Not one of the better values on the slate, but one of the better values on Indiana. And then you also do have a potential good actual value here in Chris Duarte at 3,300 as well.
So you want to... We're going to hit on a couple really ridiculous positions. I'm assuming you saw Tyus Jones' position on FanDuel for today as small forward, power forward, which is really just ever the gem. Miles Turner, power forward only eligibility on FanDuel tonight.
That doesn't seem right.
How? I really want my dog to shut up. I don't know who he's barking at 10 o'clock in the morning, but it'd be really cool if he wasn't. Duarte is the interesting one. 3,300. I gave him 22 minutes. I think he makes for a really nice pay down. The problem is we have infinite 4,500 and below guys to play today because pricing, at least on DraftKings, is very broken.
Yeah, there's no shortage of good value options today. And even and then also the guys at the top aren't really that expensive. So it's going to be a really high scoring slate. There's kind of no way around that. And it's one where just from like a more holistic view, there's enough options at pretty much every price tier that if certain guys are pulling, for the most part, if certain guys are pulling massive amounts of ownership, you're going to be able to find pretty easy similar alternatives.
Absolutely. Yeah, I kind of like the top end of Indiana. Sabonis, Brogdon, Turner, they are going to be guys that I get to pretty regularly. I would really like Miles Turner to have center eligibility on DraftKings or on FanDuel. I don't think that's a huge ask. Is there anything else you want to touch on from the Pacers?
No, I think that's about it. At the top, it's the normal guys, and then you have Chris Duarte as value.
On to their opponent, Charlotte Hornets, hosting this bad boy. We've got LaMelo Ball, 7,600 on FanDuel, 7,700 on DraftKings. This team is relatively healthy. I think everybody that could be playing will be playing here. I think LaMelo is the best option out of anybody on the Hornets. I think everybody else kind of looks ultra similar relative to salary. So who stands out most to you from the Hornets?
Nobody really stands out in the context of the entire slate, but I'm with you that Ball looks like the best option on the team. Averaged about 1.24 DraftKings points per minute last season. I have him like 5 points higher in raw point projection than anyone else on the team. So he looks like the best value on the Hornets. He looks like the best raw point scorer. But again, when you start comparing him to a lot of these other guys with broken prices and, on some teams that are missing a guy or two, he's not really going to stand out. So it's more of just a tournament play based on his ceiling than, someone that I expect to be getting a lot of.
Yeah. He's definitely the guy that has like the biggest boom score for me. Rozier is probably a close second. I'd like to get to all of like the starting pieces of Charlotte in some sort of form, but I don't have anybody here other than Ball that I think is going to be in like a large swath of my lineups, barring any really weird ownership on the opposite side.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's more so like if I need a low owned piece in a lineup, LaMelo Ball obviously is good, but not someone that I think I'd be prioritizing.
I'm going to strangle my dog in the nicest way possible if he doesn't zip it. There better be someone delivering me like buckets of gold or Bitcoin or something, and there's somebody on my porch. I don't have anything else.
If somebody was like robbing you.
For
me,
I mean, they can have whatever they want. It's just stuff. I don't care at all. I don't have anything else for Indiana and Charlotte. So let's move it on to the Chicago Bulls at the Detroit Pistons. Bulls are 5-point favorites in Detroit, 219 total on the game. Kobe White is out for Chicago. Cade Cunningham, the number 1 pick in the draft, out for Detroit. Troy Brown is questionable for the Bulls. As I look at Chicago, I don't have a lot that stands out as like somebody that I want to get to pretty aggressively. We have to work DeMar DeRozan into this offense now. This is going to be a high-powered offense on certain nights. It's going to be great. I just don't know how you pick out of Vooch, Levine, DeRozan, Lonzo as just a facilitator. Does anybody really stand out to you on the Bulls?
No, it's more similar to the Charlotte team where, there's plenty of guys here that have ceilings. It wouldn't be surprising if any of Vooch, Levine, DeRozan, Ball have, good games any given night, but it's going to be really, really difficult to sort of point out one of them that looks like a good play because there are only so many shots to go around. They're going to eat into each other's usage, at least to some extent. And so you also don't have like the pricing on them is not that cheap either. 8,700 for Levine. There's a ceiling there, but it's not like he's really underpriced. 9K for Vooch, kind of the same thing. 7,100 for DeRozan, the same thing. So it's another team where they all just sort of, I think, are priced where they should be for what I expect their role to be on this team. So if you're playing 150 lineups, obviously maybe you get to some of these guys just, sprinkled in, but I don't see anything that I'm prioritizing just because they're all, I think, priced about where they should be.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. It would be really hard for me to want to get to anything with volume. 4K Patrick Williams on FanDuel, I think, is an okay value. Small forward, power forward eligibility. But I have a really tough time sifting through Vooch, Levine, DeRozan, and Ball. They're going to end up in my lineups probably in like the 5 to 10% range across the board. And that's really the best that I can hope for. Well, it's going to be a little bit different on the Pistons side. The Pistons are an interesting team. We've got Jeremy Grant at 7,200 on FanDuel, 6,500 on DraftKings. I certainly like that price. We've got Isaiah Stewart for 5,200 on FanDuel, only power forward eligible. He's about to start at center tonight, so that seems really smart once again. Isaiah Stewart and Tyus Jones playing the same position on FanDuel today. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense. I kind of feel the same way about the Pistons as I do about the Bulls, though, in that I don't know who to go to and everybody looks the same. Does anybody immediately pop for you?
I think Grant stands out more than anyone else. I agree with you in the sense that in the context of the slate, there's not much that I plan on prioritizing here, but I do think there's a bigger gap for me between Grant and the rest of the team than there is on the Bulls between, like any of those guys. Grant last season averaged 1.06 DraftKings points per minute. A lot of that was, with higher usage guys on the floor as well. If you take Blake Griffin in particular off, Grant averaged 1.07 DraftKings points per minute, but he had a 29.3% usage rate. So, I think the upside's certainly there. He's pretty inexpensive as well.
Do you get to anybody else that's a priority? I mean, like basically this whole team is priced in like the mid fives to low sixes. There's no odd bargains that I think are going to be popping up as like value plays that I want to get to. I mean, like Hamidou Diallo's 3,500 on FanDuel, shooting guard, small forward. If you need a pay down, there's just 100 other pay downs. So you got to expect Diallo to one, get double digit or get to 20 plus minutes, which I don't know is the case. I have him at 18, and then two, also succeed. So it's a tough sell on a normal day, like on an early slate or something. Diallo as a value on FanDuel works, but there's no, other than Grant, I can't see anybody pulling a ton of ownership for me.
Yeah, this is kind of a team that if the slate were smaller, they'd be really interesting to kind of throw some darts at. Because, for example, we know Kelly Olynyk is very, very, very capable of just posting massive fantasy performances if he's, depending on his role. But this is obviously the first game of the season, so we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like. The best or the best estimate is that you're getting, mid to upper 20s in minutes from Olynyk. You're going to have, Grant getting up shots. You're going to have the ball, in the hands of the guards. So, Olynyk looks okay. If it were a smaller slate, I'd be more interested in, taking some shots there, taking some shots at Isaiah Stewart, just because he's a high fantasy point per minute guy. But on a slate this big, where you have so many good options, those guys all pretty, fall back pretty quickly.
Anything else in this game?
Nope.
Perfect. We move it on to the Boston Celtics at the New York Knicks. Celtics 2-point dogs, 217 total. Al Horford out for Boston, COVID. Nerlens Noel, doubtful for the Knicks. Jaylen Brown, questionable, COVID adjacent. I'm not entirely sure if he has it or not, but that is the reason. Yeah.
I thought he had tested positive.
Did he?
I mean, I could be wrong, but
he is questionable. Horford is officially out. I know that they're both because of COVID. I just don't know if it's
okay, yeah, Brown had it, but now he's good. He's just may or may not be in shape.
Okay. Well, there we go. I have them both in, or I have Brown in for right now. Let's start with the Boston side of this game. Got a couple weird prices. Robert Williams is 6,300 on FanDuel. He's 5,100 on DraftKings, and that is a very, very interesting price tag for him. If something happens and Robert Williams happens to get in foul trouble, I think $3,400 Enes Kanter at least deserves a look as a weird dude. But again, so much value today that you really need those minutes to work out well. If Jaylen Brown doesn't play, Jason Tatum is going to look pretty good. But for me, Robert Williams is the first guy that I'm looking at.
Yeah, same here. He's, assuming Jaylen Brown is in, Williams is the guy that's really going to stand out here because we already know that Horford is out. Williams is a very good fantasy point per minute player. Last year, he averaged 1.27 DraftKings points per minute in 1,030 minutes played. You can expect him to, barring foul trouble, to get, the bulk of the center minutes. So I think that he looks like a very, very good value. And then you mentioned Kanter. This is kind of the first situation that we've had to talk about where, Kanter projects as a decent point per dollar value at 3,400, even if you're just assuming he plays his normal amount of minutes. But where he becomes really interesting is in tournaments when we don't have ownership yet, but I'm assuming Robert Williams is going to get a good amount of ownership. But if Williams gets in foul trouble, you're going to get more Enes Kanter on the floor. He's a very good fantasy point per minute player as well. So there is sort of a role for him on this slate where, you definitely don't want to roster him with Robert Williams because the ceiling case for Enes Kanter takes minutes away from Williams. But he definitely has a path to just being a really, really good value option tonight.
Are you seeing anything else here outside of the centers? Is it Tatum if Brown is out? Is it either one of them if he's in?
Yeah, Tatum, if Brown is out, will look pretty good. If Brown is in, I don't really see it for either guy just because they are priced, I think, pretty appropriately. $9,400 on DraftKings for Jason Tatum. But without Brown on the floor last year, 1.38 DraftKings points per minute, 34.3% usage percentage, 21.7% assist percentage for Jason Tatum. So I think he gets a bump if Brown is out. I think that goes without saying, but it would make him look a lot better. But I think he really needs that to be someone that I'm heavily interested in.
Okay. I don't think I have any. And don't forget, the Knicks last year, one of the slowest teams in the league, one of the better defenses as well. So this isn't exactly a great DFS spot just in general. We're going to need to see Jaylen Brown not be on the floor to really open up additional usage for others. New York Knicks side of the ball. By the way, I don't know, like I got to hit this tweet up because I just retweeted it before we started this show. It's the list of everyone that started at point guard for the Knicks over the past like decade, and it is gross. When I get to that, I'm going to read it off. But let's look at this Knicks team now with Kemba Walker at the helm. Evan Fournier is here now. Mitchell Robinson is 5,200 on FanDuel, 5,100 on DraftKings. But as per usual, I don't get the sense that I'm going to be getting to a lot of New York Knicks on a DFS contest, particularly on an 11-game slate.
Yeah, neither do I. Like, you have Mitchell Robinson at that same price point as Robert Williams. He's probably going to play similar minutes, if not a few more minutes. But the difference is that in between 700 and 800 minutes alongside Julius Randle last year, Mitchell Robinson only averaged 0.85 DraftKings points per minute, whereas, you had Williams at 1.27. Even if you run the numbers with the starters on Williams, I think it might come down a little bit, but it's not coming down anywhere close to where Robinson's at alongside Randle. So you get a pretty big difference in point per minute production from those guys. So it makes Williams look better at that price point. Julius Randle always gives you a massive ceiling, but he's also, I think pretty fairly priced at 8,800, given how cheap a lot of the other stars on the slate are as well. So I think, Randle looks fine. RJ Barrett at 5,700 on DraftKings looks fine. But there's nothing that really stands out from the Knicks.
I would say Barrett's my favorite guy on DraftKings. Point guard, small forward. So you get the guard forward spot as well. 5 different lineup spots. 5,700 works. Going to play in 32, 34 minutes. I'd be the guy that I'd be getting to most, I think, on the DK side. Here it is. Every Knicks starting point guard on opening night since 2009. Starting in 2009. Chris Duhon, Ray Felton, Tony Douglas, Felton again, Prigioni, Shane Larkin, Calderon, Rose, Sessions, Trey Burke, Alonzo Trier, Elfrid Payton. That is disgusting.
Yeah, that's not very good.
I mean, like, I'm a Prigioni fan and all. Probably don't want him starting at that point in time in 2013. 2016 Derrick Rose was not a good basketball player. Like, that's brutal. So shout out to Kemba Walker, who I assume will end up just being awful now for some strange reason.
One thing to touch on, mentioned in chat, that I think was a good point to bring up, but somebody said Kemba might hurt Randle for DFS. He could. I'm not expecting that he does. And the reason is just that Derrick Rose didn't really make a difference for Randle last year. When Rose was off the floor, Randle averaged 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. When Rose was on the floor, Randle averaged 1.27 DraftKings points per minute. Obviously, Walker and Rose are different players, but the idea being that, Kemba could take fantasy production away because he's a ball handler and a relatively high usage guy. Derrick Rose fits both of those as well. Didn't have any fantasy impact on Randle. So certainly something that we'll want to pay attention to as the season goes forward. But my expectation going in is that Julius Randle is still going to be Julius Randle.
Yeah, I think Fournier actually hurts him a little bit worse because I think Kemba Walker can actually work with him, pick and roll type stuff. They didn't have that kind of guy to actually run a competent offense before. Fournier is now a guy that's going to be like getting a ball off a closeout and taking additional shots that like Reggie Bullock in the corner wasn't getting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think Fournier is going to be a particularly high usage guy here, but he probably will be higher than Bullock.
Right. Yeah. We're on the same page there. I don't have anything else for this one, Boston or New York.
Me neither.
All righty. Schedule for the rest of the day. We have a ton of content coming up. Immediately after this, 11 a.m., NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition. Laffy, Eric, Matt Gajewski taking the first look at our ownership projections for week 7 in the NFL, I believe. PGA Live before lock at 3 p.m. with Eric and Ben. The No House Advantage NFL show at 4 with Eitan and Greg. MLB Strategy Show. I did not know the Braves gacked away that game last night until I just saw it in chat. That sucks. Really thought they were up 3-0. Big time bummer. Terry and Gundacker breaking down baseball for today. NBA Deeper Dive at 5. Eric will be with Adam. And then at 6 p.m., NBA Live before lock with Eitan and Greg. Plus, if you're looking for it, free content today, NBA projections, NHL projections, and PGA rankings. And I assume that message from the boss man. Nope, that's not what I thought it was. Ooh, maybe it is. All right, ownership should be up, Adam, if you want to go ahead and grab that. I assume you want it too. I'm going to refresh mine so that I can get it. And then I'm going to take a peek back at the 3 games that we talked about just to see if anything stands out that we want to make sure we touch on. But some of these numbers are a lot higher than I was expecting. Scotty Barnes, on the other hand, isn't the guy that is higher than I was expecting. That much I can tell you. All right, so FanDuel in, DraftKings in. All right, looking back, Indiana, Highest owned guy in the game is Chris Duarte at 22% on DraftKings. Feels a little high, but I get it. Otherwise, it's a bonus. On the Charlotte side, the guy getting the most ownership is LaMelo Ball. Nothing else crazy happening there, so we agreed. The Bulls' highest owned guy in the entire game for Chicago is Levine at 11% on FanDuel, so that shook out exactly like we were expecting. For the Pistons, Isaiah Stewart on FanDuel, as I mentioned, the $5,200 price tag, not good. And then Jeremy Grant for $6,500 is the highest owned guy on DK. For Boston, no ownership coming in here. Everybody is under 10%. So what we expected. Similar story for the Knicks, who I believe aren't in our ownership at all on DraftKings.
I'm kind of surprised Williams is as low owned as he is.
Let me go back and look at it quick. Same. Actually, very aggressively same, but there are a lot of center options to go.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's never surprising on an 11 game slate. If some center just isn't as popular as you kind of assume they would be.
And that'll all, like, these are going to stabilize a bit. Letting Alex know the Knicks are missing from DraftKings. But anyway, let's keep it moving. We're on to your Washington Wizards taking on the Toronto Raptors. And this game is actually legitimately crazy from a pricing perspective. I'm really excited to dig in. For the Wizards, no Rui Hachimura, no Thomas Bryant, Pascal Siakam out for the Raptors. Chris Boucher is questionable. Let's start with your Wizards. Spencer Dinwiddie, a completely preposterous 4,900 on DK. I don't care what our ownership says right now. It's 18%. He will be owned more than 18% at 4,900, unless he's on a minutes limit that I'm not aware of. But I like Dinwiddie. I will happily roster Beal. Montrezl Harrell is 3,700 as a backup center. Kyle Kuzma is 4,700 on FanDuel. We're going to be getting to a lot of the Wizards, I think.
Yeah, Dinwiddie is the one that really stands out first to me. He played 26 minutes in their final preseason game. I haven't seen anything about any sort of hard minutes restriction. Even if you're going to get 30 to 32 minutes, he should be fine there. There's certainly the potential for him to get more as well. Clearly he missed most of last season with injury, but he's a productive fantasy option. 1.17 DraftKings points per minute in 67 games played over the last 2 seasons, and there's not really much competition for shots here outside of Bradley Beal. Like, Beal obviously is going to do a lot, but it's not like when Dinwiddie was in Brooklyn, he was the only guy and he was still producing there. So I think he's pretty clearly mispriced here.
Yeah, it's insane. I will have 50% Spencer Dinwiddie tonight if he really is projected for 18% ownership at this rate. He's just going to be in everything I have. But I want to get to Beal. I want to get to Kuzma on FanDuel. I want to get to Montrezl Harrell as a backup. Like, if Daniel Gafford picks up a couple of fouls, does Montrezl Harrell just smash in this spot?
Probably. I mean, it's really tough to say because I think the front court rotation for the Wizards is going to be one of the more volatile situations this season, particularly once Bryant comes back. Right now they are clearly shorthanded without Bryant and without Rui. So I would assume that Harrell sees quite a bit of run if Gafford gets in foul trouble. They, could still play small. I don't know that they would. I mean, it's because it's a new coach too. Like, if it were Scott Brooks, I would say they're not playing small because Scott Brooks just refuses. But who knows kind of what they do in that situation. But I think there's a good chance it means quite a bit more playing time for Harrell.
We also have Toronto's backcourt being Precious Achiuwa and Kem Birch. So they can kind of roll out whoever they want. But I gave Harrell, what do you think the split in minutes is going to be here between these two? Are you looking like 28-20 or, coin flip it?
Yeah, I mean, I think my guess would be 26-22 in favor of Gafford, just because I think it makes sense. Like, Gafford is the guy that Washington should want to play the bulk of the minutes because they just signed him to the extension. He is at least someone that there's a chance he ends up being a very good player going forward. Harrell, what he is. He's not on the next good Wizards team. No. So they should be prioritizing Gafford, all things equal. Don't know what that means. Gafford is someone that in the past has been very, very good over shorter stints, but then when they try to stretch him out, he gets gassed. He has, said that he needed to work on that. Maybe he did. So my guess is something like 25 or 26 minutes for Gafford. 22 or 23 for Harrell, assuming no foul trouble. But it's not like it'll be surprising if it's 28-20. It's not like it'll be surprising if it's 24-24. I think it's a pretty big wide range of outcomes.
Anything else on Washington?
No, I don't think so. Talked about Harrell. You mentioned Kuzma. Beal, clearly, it's another one of those guys in the like Jason Tatum category of, I think, more of a luxury than a necessity on this particular slate, but still obviously a very high upside option.
Well, this is the reason you might not want to go to anything that we just said from Washington, because the pricing on Toronto is broken. Precious Achiuwa on DraftKings is 3,100. We have him projected for 18% ownership. He's got power forward center eligibility. I promise you that if Precious Achiuwa is starting at center, he's probably going to be more than 18% owned. He'll be similarly owned to Scotty Barnes, who's 3,400 on DraftKings and projected for 34% ownership. This says nothing of wanting to get to Fred VanVleet now that there's no Pascal Siakam and no Kyle Lowry. I will happily play OG Anunoby at 6,100 on DraftKings. He's $1,300 more expensive on FanDuel. Goran Dragic at 5K on DK looks good. I think we just have to lock and load Toronto, including at least one of Precious Achiuwa or Scotty Barnes probably in your cash lineup.
Yeah, I think, Barnes being the highest owned guy on the slate gives you a pretty good idea there. In the first set of lineups that I crunched, crunching like 100 optimal lineups, no rules or anything. Scotty Barnes was in 97 of the 100 that I made. Precious Achiuwa was in none of them, but
how many? He's the starting center, right? Is that what we're assuming? That's what I'm assuming.
I think. It could be Birch, but I think assuming it's Achiuwa makes sense.
Okay. I got a lot more Achiuwa than Barnes. I'm more interested in Achiuwa as a fantasy performer than I am Scotty Barnes.
I have Barnes 7 fantasy points higher than Achiuwa.
I have it the exact opposite. And that doesn't make me not like Barnes. I also Barnes's minutes are a question mark for me right now. What do you have him at? Because that could be a big piece of this. I gave Achiuwa 26. I gave Barnes 24.
I have 30 for Barnes, 22 for Achiuwa.
Okay. 30 for Barnes is a lot. Not that I'm saying that it's crazy, but I've already got VanVleet, Anunoby, Dragic, and Trent at 30. Chris Boucher's status will matter a lot for this too. If he happens to be out, that will solidify more. Probably, I guess, need to give Scotty Barnes a little bit more playing time. I'm not going to have a problem getting to him, but Achiuwa is the guy that I'm most interested in from Toronto.
Yeah.
At least on DraftKings. On FanDuel, probably VanVleet. Maybe Dragic at 5,500. What else do you like for Toronto?
I'm with you. Achiuwa makes sense. I just prefer Barnes. Not Lowry. VanVleet is going to look really good as well. Last season, he played a total of 287 minutes without Siakam or Lowry on the floor. 1.19 DraftKings points per minute, 31.4% usage percentage, 32.3% assist percentage. Obviously, that's not perfect because you do have Dragic now, who is going to fill some role there. You have Barnes, but still should be a very productive Fred VanVleet. He projects as a pretty strong value at 7,500. So him and Barnes are the ones that really stand out for me. Achiuwa is fine. If you get to a little bit of Anunoby, I think that's fine as well. But the priorities for me are VanVleet and Barnes.
Anything else in this game?
No, that's a lot of pieces.
On to Cleveland and Memphis. Cleveland stinks. 7.5 point dogs in Memphis. 216 total. Dylan Windler is out for Cleveland. Dylan Brooks is out for Memphis. Dean Wade is doubtful for Cleveland. On the Cleveland side, Evan Mobley is projected for 23% ownership on FanDuel, 22 on DK. I don't totally agree with it, but I guess I understand why it's happening. He's going to play a lot. That's for sure. I don't know if 20+% is where I want to be for today, but he is probably my favorite option in Cleveland. Otherwise, I don't think I'm going to have anything here. Maybe a little Jared Allen.
Was that Mobley that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He was in 85% of the lineups I crunched just now on DraftKings. So he was the only guy from Cleveland that was in any lineup that I made.
How many minutes are you expecting Kevin Love to be playing here?
I have it at 15.
Okay. Is that possible? I know that sounds ridiculous, but can Kevin Love really be playing? Is he going to suit up to play one backup rotation in the first and second half? I mean,
Yeah,
he's been like an
weird.
ornery prick for like 2 years now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems weird, but I don't know.
So the expectation, and from what I'm seeing across the industry, it's the same. Lauri Markkanen's going to play like twice as many minutes as Kevin Love today. That seems insane.
I mean, it makes all the sense in the world.
Oh, I'm not saying that's not what they should do, but Kevin Love's minutes should either be 0 or a lot.
I mean, it completely just depends on what Kevin Love wants to do. Like, I'm sure if he doesn't want to play basketball this year, he can just go in and say, I don't want to play, and they won't play him. But like if he says I want to play, they're not going to just give him 30 minutes. So I'm just guessing Kevin Love wants to play basketball, and so he's going to play 15, 16 minutes.
I think that at least for right now, and we'll see how this shakes out. I think Kevin Love is going to play a lot more than what we're talking about today. I think Cleveland wants to win right now and be in the mix for like trying to get into a play-in game. And to do that, I don't think they're going to do it with Kevin Love playing like 12 minutes a game. We're spending way too much time on Kevin Love. This doesn't matter. He's 6,400 on FanDuel, 5,800 on DraftKings. You're going to need every single minute that he's going to be playing to work perfectly. I think they're going to be heavier on him to start the season off. If he's playing 12 minutes a game on opening night, that's nuts to me.
I just have no idea where those minutes would come from.
Slightly less for Mobley, a lot less than what we thought for Markkanen. I don't know. Look, I agree with you. It would blow my mind for him to play like a backup rotation in the first and second. But it doesn't matter. I'm not playing him even if I think he's getting 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Cleveland just sucks.
At all for fantasy.
No. It stood out to me when I saw it. Like, is he really going to play like just shit minutes in this game and just like pass it into the stands and just like cry on the court? Memphis side, on the other hand, is a little bit different. There's a lot to like here with no Dylan Brooks. John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., slow-mo, all 15% or higher on FanDuel. Jaren Jackson is 32% owned on DK at 5,900, which means that you and I are either going to have 100% or none. Desmond Bane, probably my favorite option out of anybody on Memphis, 3,200. I'm expecting him to play somewhere around 30 minutes. He's essentially free. So Bane is the guy that I like the most here, but there are a lot of pieces from Memphis that I'd be happy to get to.
Yeah, Jackson, the one that I was getting to the most. Just, obviously a really, really high upside guy as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, which is always a big if, but only 5,900 for him. I think he looks really, really good at that price. Bane, I think he's the guy I got to the second most on Memphis. I think he looks like a good value, expecting, around 30 to 32 minutes from Bane. So those two are the ones that stand out. DeAnthony Melton is pretty much always productive when he's on the floor. He hopefully actually gets more minutes this year. That would be really nice. So I think he's the third guy for me for Memphis.
Yeah, who knows on Melton? He played a lot of minutes in that last preseason game, but I never trust how much they're actually going to put him out there. They don't just ever seem to actually do it, even when guys are missing.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets the 22 minutes that he's projected for right now, I think he ends up being a good play at 3,400 on this particular slate. Not, a great play, but someone that I would still want to at least be getting to.
I gave him 18 minutes for right now. We'll see where we end up. I do have probably a little bit too many minutes going elsewhere. So I think that I can bump that up a little bit. But to me, he's just like a guy because there's so many guys. I don't have anything else for this game, but I do like that Memphis side.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the obligatory, like John Morant's very capable of having a big game, but he's also 9,100. That's a pretty loaded price tier. You have Jason Tatum in that same price range. You have Beal around there. You have Randall around there. And those are just like three guys off the top of my head. Vooch is 9K. So it's just John Morant's really good. It's going to be pretty difficult to prioritize him though.
PrizePicks is the sponsor. They're running daily prop-based contests. You could use the promo code Awesemo when signing up to get a $100 first match deposit bonus. There's no sharks or optimizers or mass entry. You can make 5-player lineups that can net you up to 10x your entry fee. Use your knowledge of multiple sports for cross-sport entries. You can download the app in the App Store, Google Play, or go to prizepicks.com. And we've got free NFL and MLB player props tools to help you make those selections. NBA coming as well. So that's what we've got. And the boss man, Alex Baker, in chat right now. That's kind of exciting. I mentioned there were a bunch of reports about Love playing a small amount of minutes in the offseason. We'll see. We'll see. They're starting to get to the time where like he's going to be able to take a buyout and end up on a contender. So
if he wants to.
Yeah. Well, we're slowly getting to the point where he doesn't have to probably give up as much as he did when he had 3 years left on that deal.
Yeah.
It's gross. Anyway, we got to keep it moving. So many games. This one's a biggie. Houston and Minnesota. Houston 5.5 point favorite, or 5.5 point dogs, 228 total on this one. No Patrick Beverley. He is suspended. Daniel House is questionable. Jalen Noel and Jordan McLaughlin also questionable. On the Houston side, Kevin Porter Jr. is 6,100 on FanDuel. You should be playing quite a bit of him, especially at point guard, small forward eligibility. Even at 7,800 on DK, I don't mind having a little bit. Christian Wood, no problem with that price tag, 8,200 and 8K. I like Jalen Green at 5,500 on FanDuel. I like him a lot at 4,200 on DraftKings for reasons that don't make any sense. Jalen Green's ownership is, I would imagine, going to be a little bit higher than 9% given that price tag. Let's go to Houston today.
Yeah, Green, the one that really stands out. He showed up in 11 of those first 100 lineups that I crunched. 4,200, a really, really good salary for him. I could see that ownership staying in the 10% range just because there are so many options. You know, like we haven't even talked about Jalen Suggs yet. We've already talked about Scotty Barnes. You have Dinwiddie at the guard positions. So, I mean, I think it's just a situation where the pricing is so broken that it almost isn't broken just because, like, you're still going to have to make decisions between guys. So, either way, you know, I think a really, really good play. I think that there's just a lot of other options too that keep the ownership somewhat in check, especially because he doesn't have forward eligibility on DraftKings. He's just point guard, shooting guard. That's, you know, something that's a big difference, for example, between him and Scotty Barnes. Like someone had mentioned when we talked about the Toronto game, someone had mentioned that he thought Achua was more valuable than Barnes because of all the guard value. But on DraftKings, you can play Barnes at small forward. So it makes it so you can get him into a bunch of different spots, whereas Jalen Green, you can't. But either way, I think Green stands out as the top value from Houston. I don't think that's particularly close. I'm with you. Kevin Porter Jr.'s salary on FanDuel in particular is very, very appealing. On DraftKings, him and Christian Wood are more of guys in that boat where they're appropriately priced. 8K for Wood, 7,800 for Porter. On a slate like this where so many guys are underpriced, those you know, players like Porter and Wood just aren't going to show up in a lot of lineups. It doesn't mean they're bad plays. They still clearly can go get 50 fantasy points. They both have a lot of upside, but they're just not going to be priorities because there are so many mispriced players.
Oh, what was I going to say? I would say this about Jalen Green, at least on DraftKings. I think his floor is like his price tag, basically. He's going to play 30 minutes, I believe, or more. He's going to shoot a ton. He's the future of this franchise. Like, for him to bust here is basically like he doesn't play even nearly the amount of minutes that we see because he's got carte blanche. This is his franchise now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of think maybe that it's been too long. The layoff made you forget how creative guys can get in their ways to bust in NBA games. But I mostly agree with your point.
I'm really high on Jalen Green. You know, for him to play like he did last year against men, not like a college season. I think he's ready for this in a way that most people don't understand that he's ready for this. So 4,200 for me is a salary where, like, I think he could break that big time against a Minnesota team that's probably one of the 5 worst defenses in the league.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird situation too, just thinking about it more from like a casual perspective. Since he didn't play in college, there's probably a perception that like he's not quite as good as the college guys since he's not known or whatever, but then he was actually playing against like adults.
Yeah, and efficient too. It's not like he was some scrub. Jarrett Jack was on the team with him, and the way that Jarrett Jack has talked about him is kind of crazy. Big fan of him moving forward. So I do like what we're going to get there. On the Minnesota side, Towns is 10-8 on FanDuel, 9,700 on DraftKings. 9,700 for Towns on DraftKings feels pretty good when this team is at full strength. This is a really good offense. Like they picked it up a lot towards the end of the season last year when everybody started getting back. Defense will be a little bit trickier. I'd say Edwards is the guy I like the most across FanDuel and DraftKings, but I'm happy to get to Russell for 7,500 on FanDuel or Malik Beasley for 4,800 there. What stands out most to you from Minnesota?
From the Minnesota side, I think Towns is actually the one that stands out the most, which is kind of surprising since he is a pay up option, but he does, I think, project as one of the better pay up options here. 9,700 on DraftKings. Anthony Edwards would be where I get next, but that's, you know, a pretty big gap there between what I was getting in terms of Towns, what I was getting in terms of Edwards. I think Jaden McDaniels, from a value standpoint, looks like a pretty solid option as well at 3,600, but a loaded price range. He's not at the top of my list of guys to get to there. But I think Towns is the guy that I get to the most, just one of the better, raw point projections that we have.
Damon Struve, I got to hit on this just so you don't ever think that it's something. They're a bad defense. Pace has nothing to do with defense. A higher pace, giving up more points, has a worse defensive ranking is not a stat that I would ever look at in my entire life. Everything should be pace adjusted in the NBA. Minnesota has a terrible defense. It's not up for debate. Karl Anthony Towns is not a good defender, and he is the center on this team. They're going to be one of the 5 worst defenses when the league is over.
Yeah, and the pace is factored into defensive rating. Yes. You can't just look at points per game like that. Right. That's where the pace screws it up.
Yes. I would never look at points per game for anything ever. I wouldn't even know what the numbers would be.
Defensive rating is per 100 possessions, so pace doesn't matter.
Yeah. Jaden McDaniels for 3,600 is an okay value on DK, but again, we've got a sea of them on DraftKings today. Anything else in this game?
Nope. Just give me some Towns lighting up that Houston front court.
Yep.
Did you see the gorilla video thing?
That he's watching like gorillas kill each other before games or something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be Christian Wood today, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you should have watched those videos when Jimmy Butler was there. Philadelphia 76ers, 3-point favorites in New Orleans. I'm surprised it's not bigger, 225 total. In case you've been living under a rock, Ben Simmons is not going to be available for this one for the Sixers. Shake Milton out as well. The biggest bummer in all of this is that Zion Williamson is not healthy for the New Orleans Pelicans, and we have no idea when he's actually going to be back. But on the Philly side, Joel Embiid is 11K on FanDuel, 10-6 on DraftKings, and I would love to pay up for him. But he is not the only guy because for some strange reason, Tyrese Maxey's priced like Ben Simmons was going to show up for this game. 4,600 on FanDuel, 4K on DraftKings. He's the starting point guard and one of my favorite plays of the day, including being the number 1 contender on both sites.
Yeah, right there with you. I think these are 2 of the best options on the slate. Embiid played 463 minutes without Ben Simmons on the floor last year. He averaged 1.84 DraftKings points per minute, 43.6% usage percentage, 22% assist percentage. Granted, some of that I'm sure was just with the second unit where like you don't have Tobias Harris out there either. But in a total of 294 minutes with Harris on and Simmons off, still 1.7 DraftKings points per minute, 41.5% usage rate, 17.2% assist percentage, 19.4% rebounding percentage for Embiid. Just clearly a top option here without Simmons. And then Maxey is clearly one of the best value options when you have him stepping into the starting role. No Simmons, no Milton, so plenty of minutes available for Maxey. He's a productive player when he's on the floor. We saw that last year. When he got opportunities, he was able to do well from a fantasy standpoint. He just, it was a very deep Sixers team last year, and he was stuck behind Simmons and Milton, so he wasn't able to get the minutes. But the minutes are there for him now. Overall, last year, 0.93 DraftKings points per minute. With Embiid on the floor, I expect that to come down, but it's still, he played 254 minutes alongside Embiid, 0.72 DraftKings points per minute. Not sure how many of those minutes didn't have Simmons, but the point being, at 4K, if you're going to get 30 plus minutes from Maxey, I still think that it's a really good option. He played 163 total minutes without Simmons, with Embiid, 0.79 DraftKings points per minute. I think just one of the better values tonight.
Still happy to get to Harris. 35% ownership on FanDuel feels a little high to me. I think that I'll probably end up under that number if it holds, just because I think there are other options, but he's clearly one of the guys that I should have in my lineups. Do you like anything else from Philly?
I'm with you on Harris too. 294 minutes alongside Embiid without Simmons, 1.12 DraftKings points per minute, 25% usage percentage for Harris.
730 people are in here right now. Only 127 likes. I appreciate you guys. You guys are the best. And chat is killing it today. Let's hit that thumbs up. Let's see if we can get that number north of 200 before we finish off this show. Let's talk about this Pelicans team that is gross. Brandon Ingram, going to get a lot of looks. 7,700 on DK sounds pretty good. I think Joe Val for 6,500 on FanDuel is another price that stands out. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is 5,100 on FanDuel. I think that is a price that stands out. Najee Marshall is 3,900, usually picks up some additional minutes when Zion isn't in. So there's some things to like for the Pelicans, but I think they're more on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings.
Yeah, looking at it from the DraftKings side, there's still things to like. Brandon Ingram is still a high upside option. He's reasonably priced. Same can be said for Jonas Valanciunas at 7,400, but they're both guys that are more in that range of they're sort of getting sprinkled into like those top 100 lineups I made, which tells me that they're not really cash options. They're more so guys that I'll be looking at in tournaments, especially if they're not projected for a lot of ownership, guys that just give you a high ceiling at relatively low ownership. They shouldn't be that highly owned just because of the way the slate breaks down. The pricing is pretty close to correct on these guys, but they do just still give you a really high ceiling. Playing without Zion, it's still pretty easy to see how these guys could have some success. Ingram last year played 833 minutes without Zion on the floor, 1.25 DraftKings points per minute, 31.5% usage rate. So, and you could, see the ball in his hands a little bit more this year as well. So I like Ingram, but again, just in the context of the entire slate, wouldn't say is a priority.
Anything else for the Pels?
Nope.
On to a truly not good team. The Orlando Magic, 5.5-point dogs at San Antonio, 213 total. So two terrible teams, terrible total. This is just not good. Out for the Magic, Markelle Fultz, Chuma Okeke, Jonathan Isaac, Eton Moore, and Michael Carter-Williams. I think four of those five guys are going to play a lot of minutes when they can. Zach Collins out for the Spurs. I should just say out permanently because he's Zach Collins. If we look at the Orlando side, though, we got to talk at least a little bit about a couple things. I think that Wendell Carter Jr. for 5,300 on FanDuel looks pretty good, as does Terrence Ross for 4,400 with all of those guys out. I don't get that one. I assume he goes 4 for 27 from the field, and that's how I don't like it. Mo Bamba, 5,300 on FanDuel, 5,700 on DraftKings. I think where we need to start here is this, because we're going to get to Suggs. What is the center rotation for Orlando? Are Bamba and Robin Lopez and Wendell Carter, like some of these guys, going to play alongside of each other a lot? Because we've got Wendell Carter getting ownership. We've got Mo Bamba getting the most ownership of anybody on FanDuel. And I don't think that they signed Robin Lopez to not play. This team's got too many bigs, and I think they're going to be playing alongside of each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they will. I was pulling up last year to see how many minutes of Bamba and Carter we got. It's just, I kind of think Bamba just like they only played they played 3 possessions together last season. But it's almost, I think Bamba kind of put the Magic in a situation they weren't prepared for with the way he played at the end of last season, because he went real quick from looking like a bust to looking really, really good. And they'd already acquired Carter, who also I think is going to be good. So
they also gave him the bag too.
Right. Yeah. So it ends up just being a weird situation. I would think that they at least try them alongside each other. I don't know if it'll work, but it's not like Orlando's a good team either. So, kind of would, I guess, make sense for them. Like, just get playing time for these guys, figure out what you actually need to do with them a year or two from now. And, just have a better idea of what you have. So I would expect, at least out of the gate, that they're playing alongside each other some, because it's just hard to imagine that like that they're either only playing 24 minutes a piece, or that one of Bamba and Carter is only going to play like 16 minutes. Pretty difficult to see either of those things.
Talk to me about Jalen Suggs, 4K on DraftKings, looking like a pretty good value to me. But again, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. He's another one. He only has guard eligibility, point guard, shooting guard. So not quite as flexible as Barnes, which is why I think he's a little bit lower owned, but still one of the better values. Projects for 25 to 26 DraftKings points, only $4,000. I think he's another guy that, not saying he has to be in your cash lineup, because there are so many good values. You certainly could get to a position where you just have a different one instead of him, but definitely on the short list for cash games.
Cole Anthony is 5K on FanDuel. If he's playing 30 minutes, like I think that he's going to, 4% ownership seems a little weird. I think he's just going to have to play a lot because they're so limited in the guard side of this game. But it could just as easily be RJ Hampton, or maybe it's more Suggs. But I like Cole Anthony a lot on FanDuel. He's $1,700 cheaper than he is on DraftKings.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, even on DraftKings, he kind of just strikes me as one of those. I mean, he's really expensive on DraftKings, $6,700, but like, he strikes me as one of those plays where he ends up being a good tournament play just because there's so many good options tonight that he kind of gets overlooked. And like you're saying, definitely better on FanDuel at the discount. But Cole Anthony averaged about a fantasy point per minute last year. I agree with you that there's minutes available for him. There's plenty of usage available for him. So I like Anthony in terms of his opportunities here. It's just hard to prioritize him given all the other options, but typically that's going to make someone appealing in tournaments.
All right, we're going on to Oklahoma City and Utah. The Thunder are 12 point. Oh shit. Yeah, Spurs. Sorry. I'm trying to push us through here. Mental note moving forward, we're never doing 11 games in an hour again. So we'll figure out how we need to change that. Spurs side, Derek White projected for 39% ownership on FanDuel at 5,600. I like him. I don't know if I like 39% of him, so you'd be more likely to be a fade for me, but I do think he's the best option on FanDuel. DeJounte looks pretty good at 6,800 on the DK side. After that, I'm probably going to be light on the Spurs.
Yeah, DeJounte is the guy that I like the most from San Antonio. I don't think we have an ownership projection on him right now.
We don't have the Spurs in the ownership.
Okay. Yeah, that was confusing me. But Murray's just, a really, really good fantasy producer. He's not that expensive at 6,800. I mean, for example, on DraftKings, he's $100 more expensive than Cole Anthony on the other side of this game. He's going up against a very bad Orlando team. Pretty good chance that you get Murray running into some defensive stats here, just, assuming that Orlando's going to turn the ball over a good amount. And that's in addition to, what Murray just brings on his own. I think he looks like a very high upside option. Beyond that, I think Derek White looks okay. I think Pirtle looks okay, but DeJounte Murray, the guy that I like the most here.
Anything else for the Spurs?
Nope. God, this should be an ugly game.
Yeah. OKC and Utah. Speaking of ugly games, I think you could play Shea, and that's about it.
Yeah. Shea looks really good.
Yeah.
Everyone else just looks really, really bad.
They're going to get wrecked here. I don't know how they score. This team's not going to be able to score, generally speaking, and the Utah defense is not giving it up.
Yeah, it's always kind of tough to talk about in a spot like this because I don't want to go into it saying, I think OKC gets blown out. You can't play Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, whatever. But then you also look at it, it's just like, man, like I think Gilgeous-Alexander's floor is just a bit lower than it normally would be because one, he could just not get the minutes, if the score gets out of hand. But two, like there's just nothing else that the Jazz really need to focus on. Lou Dort's made some improvements offensively, but I'm sure that Utah can live with Dort keeping the game close as opposed to Gilgeous-Alexander keeping it close. Like I like Gilgeous-Alexander quite a bit. I think he's a good player. I think he's underpriced at 7,200 for his ceiling. I just think that, he's a little bit riskier here than he typically will be.
Yeah, I don't have anything else that I could say about OKC. And much like normal, I don't get the sense that I want to go to anything from Utah. If they show, like, if any of the starting five plus whoever Jordan Clarkson or something pop into a lineup, I'm not going to freak out, but I don't think they get a ton of run. Like, I think they're going to be able to be pretty soft about it, be pretty spread out about it. And it's still the Jazz. So, like, they're not a great fantasy team normally.
Right. And the pricing's not that great either. I mean, Donovan Mitchell is more expensive than, like, pretty much anyone we've talked about so far. He's in that same price range with like Karl Anthony Towns. So that's a pretty tough salary. Gobert is about where he should be. The one thing I would say about Utah, and I think this is like the perfect example of something that you and I had talked about on the NBA show that we did on Monday. When you have a team like Oklahoma City that's a 12-point dog, and they have one player in particular in Gilgeous-Alexander that could just have a massive game, I really like the idea of using the boost feature in Fantasy Cruncher here, because you're not naturally if you just run lineups, you're going to get a bunch of Gilgeous-Alexander because he has a good projection. You're going to get like no Utah because they don't project that well. But in Gilgeous-Alexander's best games, this game's going to be competitive toward, throughout at least most of the fourth quarter. So it's going to make guys like Mitchell, Gobert, Conley play towards the upper end of their minutes range. So I like the idea of saying, if Gilgeous-Alexander's in a lineup, you don't necessarily want to hard code it and say, you have to have someone from Utah. You could, but on a slate this big, I don't really want to do that. But just making it so that Fantasy Cruncher gives you a relatively high percentage of your Gilgeous-Alexander lineups that have someone from Utah.
I like it. Anything else here?
Nope.
Denver and Phoenix. This is another tough spot for me. Denver 6-point dogs, 223 total. Obviously no Jamal Murray in this one. That's really the only thing that we have to worry about there. By the way, Rudy Gay out for Utah in that previous game. Jokic, 20% ownership at 10-4. I would have no problem getting whatever Nikola Jokic on any slate because he's Nikola Jokic. Michael Porter Jr. is 6,400 on DraftKings. I think that stands out as well, but not a ton that I want to get to from Denver. This is a game I want to watch, not necessarily roster.
Jokic, pretty much the one spot that's really showing up for me. Obviously you can go to guys like Porter in tournaments, but Jokic, there's just so much value on the slate that you're going to start filling out your lineups with, or finish, filling out your lineups with the highest projected guys. Like in my top lineup right now, it has Embiid and Jokic. I think that's, very, very reasonable. Clearly you're going to get to some that have Towns also, but Jokic is the guy that really shows up for me.
Yeah, I don't see any other priorities coming out of Denver. Guys that you can get to, sure, but nobody that we should be talking about. On the Phoenix side, I would be more likely to not play anyone from Phoenix on DraftKings. Jay Crowder's getting some love on FanDuel because he's only 4K. I think that works as a value option, but to me, there are no priorities on Phoenix. This is a slow team when Chris Paul's here.
Yeah, it's kind of just, and the thing is too, the way the slate shakes out with all the value and then all the high scoring guys at the top, it just becomes kind of difficult to prioritize anyone in this price range unless they're glaringly mispriced. And these guys aren't. CP3 is fine, Ayton's fine, Booker clearly gives you a high ceiling, but it's just more so guys that I'll be sprinkling in the tournament lineups to get a low owned, high upside player, as opposed to saying, oh, I think Chris Paul wins me this slate, I'm playing 30%. Like, there's just no real reason.
You ready to close this one out?
Yep.
We're going to get to it. Sacramento at Portland. Kings are 5-point dogs, 232.5 total. Tony Snell is out, and for all intents and purposes, so is Marvin Bagley, given the note that his agent sent the Kings. Doesn't appear that we're going to be getting there. So on the Sacramento side, $8,500 De'Aaron Fox on FanDuel is underpriced. He's pulling the ownership. It looks good. I'm not likely to get much else from Sacramento, although the Barnes, Halliburton, Heald, Holmes group of four, you can work your way into some of those guys. But Fox on FanDuel is the only priority I have in this game.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I actually thought there was going to end up being a little bit of value from Sacramento today because of the late, Bagley note, but the pricing on relevant guys was already expensive enough that it doesn't really matter. De'Aaron Fox, kind of, like John Morant-ish, where he gives you a massive ceiling. He also just doesn't project as well as a lot of other players in his price range. If I'm getting to someone from the Kings, I think, using Fox in tournaments makes some sense. The one guy I would mention that is kind of interesting is Davion Mitchell at 3,600. And the reason I think he's interesting, he doesn't stand out relative to a lot of the other value on this slate, but because he is a rookie and this is the first game of the season, I just think there's enough volatility in playing time where, maybe he finds his way onto the floor for a little bit more than we're giving him credit for. Not a priority at all, but someone that, across 150 lineups, I think is, if you needed a low owned value option, I think he makes some sense.
All right, let's close it out. Portland Trailblazers. If you want to roster Damian Lillard at 10K or 10-1, feel free. He's Damian Lillard. I think CJ for 7,200 on DraftKings is a bit underpriced. Ownership is there. If you want to get to Nurk, cool. But I think CJ and Dame are probably the two guys I want to get to most. Very little else that I'm seeing here for Portland.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up for me too. It's just another one of those teams where clearly I like Lillard, McCollum, and Nurkic, but you have to prioritize stuff. And on a slate this big, there's just a lot of guys that are going to look a little bit better in terms of value and or raw point projection. So they kind of fill that role again where, in tournament lineups, they make sense because they're not going to pull tons of ownership and they do have really high ceilings. But in terms of who like your highest owned guys are going to be, they just don't show up because, a lot more to do with what else is available on the slate than has to do with themselves.
All right, sum it up for me. Favorite plays on DraftKings for today?
Embiid, Maxey, Barnes, Jokic, Mobley, Jaren Jackson. God, I hate even saying that.
You good?
Yeah.
Deep dive later today?
Yeah, deep dive today, deeper dive after that.
There it is, everybody. Getting out at 10:59 a.m. You got to love it. NFL show coming up next. Use the promo code Curry when signing up here. Get a little bit of some money off on that first NBA week at Awesemo.com. Good luck tonight, everybody. Keep your eyes peeled for news. Make sure you're popping into our Discord if you are a premium sub. It's going to be a fun one. Good luck.